Hey everyone, Arthur here with a bunch more 360 non-backwards compatible games, and pretty much all of these are severely underrated. I wasn't planning on doing an underrated list, but it totally happened, which I loved because some of these games really deserve the vindication, man. Just a small reminder before we get there, June 18th, there will be a second wave of games added to the sale on the 360. Xbox has confirmed that, and I will be on top of it immediately. I will try to release a video with all the added games in a matter of a couple of days or as fast as possible, so subscribe so you don't miss that, and all the other 360 videos I will be doing until the marketplace closes down. So alright, let's get to the games. Welcome to the channel, this is From the Void. Up first, we have two major highlights. Both are completely exclusive to the Xbox 360 nowadays, and one is digital only and pretty obscure. We're talking about Section 8 and Section 8 Prejudice. Section 8 is a pretty cool series of futuristic first-person shooters. The reception to them was kind of lukewarm though, so they never got the attention that they deserve in my opinion. I definitely find these largely underrated, especially Prejudice. They had a strong focus on multiplayer, but the single-player campaign is perfectly enjoyable as well. Some people do call this glorified tutorials, but I beg to differ. They may not be super long, but I got my money's worth for sure. The gameplay here is awesome, I must say. Very fast-paced and frenetic. Weapons are simple to use, awesome to master. Same is true for the cool stuff your fully armored character can do, with impossibly high jumps, maniacal sprints, and a sort of auto lock-on feature that works like a power-up, lasting just a few seconds, where all your shots will hit the target, but then a long cooldown until you can use them again. Now, like I said, the games have a strong multiplayer appeal, but like any other 360 game that is not backwards compatible in more recent Xboxes, the online is pretty much dead nowadays. Prejudice is still functional online, but I'm pretty sure it's not populated. I believe you can fill in matches with AI to play, but that's far from ideal. The original was delisted everywhere, so your option is only physical for that, while the sequel remains available only on the 360, so this is the one to focus on. Next is a pretty cool game that was a few years ahead of its time, reason why it's a underrated treasure in my opinion. This is Abyss Odyssey. This is a early action roguelike, which is a genre that wasn't nearly as popularized as it is now, so I definitely attribute mostly to that the middling scores it got. That's very clear when reading criticisms to things like the length, when this is a 8 hours long game full of stuff to unlock, including a bunch of extra characters, a tough challenge that will test your ability to get good while you go down the many floors of the abyss, so this easily reaches over 15 hours if you go for a complete run, which is more than enough for today's roguelike side-scroller standards. But back then, I feel like anything below 10 hours was a letdown. The gameplay was also criticized, and I even more emphatically disagreed to that. I do agree the game is not for everyone though, because the controls are demanding here in a way that requires you to understand the length of the animations of each action you take. The characters are intentionally heavy, reminiscent of how it feels to play a Souls game. Yet another aspect that has since been accepted for what good it brings when it's coupled with a well-made combat mechanism that complements the stiffness of the animations, which is definitely the case here. So yeah, to me this is totally a underrated hidden gem, aimed at roguelike action fans of course, especially those with a knack for completionism. Although this is not backwards compatible, it does have a PlayStation 4 version, so some of you may want to favor that instead.
Trust me, son, you don't really want it.
Following up with dry, unapologetic, face-pummeling Anarchy reigns.
Yo, who want it? Knuckles clenched, blood drenched kid. Yo, who want it? Come stepping hungry, get fed. Yo, who want it? Hearing all the challenges called through the battles and brawl. I stand and they fall as a hand on the yo. Who
This is another underrated game for sure. Once again, IGN giving a great Xbox 360 game like this less than a 6 score. I mean, geez. I also feel like many may think that this is a multiplayer only game, which is not the case. The story mode is significant and enjoyable, lasting almost 15 hours for a completionist run. Of course, multiplayer is a major draw, because this is an arena brawler in its core, and it seems that the online servers are working fine, and I could even find Discord servers for the community to schedule matches. But even if you are only playing this in single player, I highly recommend Anarchy Reigns. There are some pretty cool environments here to do some street fighting in, always accompanied by crazy stuff happening around. The combat is beyond tight, real great combat here, with grabs and moves that really feel like they connect, very satisfying to play. So yeah, guaranteed fun for a fan of high adrenaline action games. And this is only on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, digitally and physically.
Yo, who want it? Come stepping hungry, get fed. Yo, who want it? Hearing all the challenges.
Moving on to a great hidden gem with kind of a generic name and portrait, reasons I think contributed to it being as obscure as it is. We're talking about Assault Heroes. This is a top-down twin-stick shooter where you ride a car, so it's very similar to Renegade Ops I featured in my last video, but this one takes a rather different approach. It is a up-scrolling game. The camera moves up automatically like old-school NES games like Jackal or Guerrilla War, which is a pretty cool style to be modernized in a twin-stick shooter fashion if you ask me. Enemies will come from all sides, and there will be all kinds of stuff to look for, the main one being a literal dungeon that you can opt to enter while leaving your vehicle behind. So this is now similar to what? Blaster Master, I guess? Which is pretty cool, right? Getting out of your vehicle and on foot is what happens when your vehicle takes too much damage. So this happens outside of the dungeons as well. And it's like a last-ditch effort, because any shot you take while on foot means death. Each weapon has a specific use. Flamethrowers are your go-to option for swarms, missiles do great damage on big enemies, and machine guns are optimal for when there are all kinds of enemies all at once and there is no time to mess around. So yeah man, Assault Heroes, a pretty great game right here, loads of fun, very much worth the cheap price of $4.99. Try it out. Next is a rather obscure series of turn-based RPGs that even fans of the genre may not know about. And how great is this subtitle? Penny Arcade on the Rain-Slick Precipice of Darkness. This was released in an episodic manner, and it was supposed to have 4 episodes, but the original developer decided to move away from the project after 2, so episodes 3 and 4 were made by another developer, Zeboyd Games, which is a great team too, responsible for Comic Star Heroine, the Cthulhu games, and This Way Madness Lies, which I covered previously, and all of these are wonderful RPGs. So this ended up in good hands. However, the graphical and gameplay styles change completely between episodes 2 and 3. You will notice that episodes 3 and 4 are not on the Xbox 360, only on Steam nowadays, but that's okay because you can't carry over stuff from episodes 2 to 3, only from 1 to 2. So if you prefer having the 2 first episodes on a console, the 360 or PlayStation 3 are the only options, and you can continue over the series on Steam. So that being the case, I'll concentrate here on the 2 original games. The graphics are pretty cool, the story is excellent with lots of effective and grown-up humor, it's very faithful to the source material, and the combat is solid. Defending will require timed inputs, there is a flash on the enemy's health bar to indicate that. That's nothing new, a lot of games do similar things, but the actual turn-based mechanism is what's different and pretty cool here. Your 3 actions for each character have individual timings and cooldowns. Items will become available almost immediately, while attacks take a bit longer and special attacks take much longer. But the game doesn't do the job of keeping track of all that for you. You will need to pay a lot of attention to all the individual action bars to use them as soon as they're ready, because enemies are usually very powerful, so it gets really challenging in the later part of the game. I really enjoy this combat mechanism. I also like the gear upgrading system that incentivizes you to defeat as many enemies as possible to collect their materials, so you will always be searching for enemies in each scene. The games are not super long, but altogether episodes 1 and 2 will grant you over 15 hours of gameplay. Now reiterating that after 2 there are no more options for episodes 3 and 4 other than PCs, I believe, maybe mobile too, not sure, but that's okay because you can only carry over stats, levels and items between 1 and 2 in any case. But anyway, Penny Arcade man, pretty cool RPGs here, check them out. Following up with yet another harshly underrated game in my opinion, Remember Me. Don't trust me that this is underrated? You don't have to. IGN gave it a 5.9, but players on Steam right now score it a 8.3. There you have it, discrepancy. And I agree with the players, man. This is a 8.3. You would never know how much production value this has by reading the reviews from critics at the time. This is a rather cinematic game full of cutscenes in a formidable dystopian future world. Graphics are impressive, voiceover is great, character models are cool, story is exciting and intriguing. The main character can use a device to modify memories of others, which actually translates into gameplay in pretty cool sequences where you have to rewind a memory and find glitches capable of being hacked. You have to figure a combination of modifications to the memories that will lead to a new one to change that person's perspective towards a situation. It's really interesting and a nice change of pace for the game. And then combat is pretty cool, man. I don't know what critics were talking about. It has a similar style to the combat in the Batman Arkham series. Granted, not as good, alright, but still pretty solid. It's all about keeping up a combo, which requires dodging incoming attacks and, more importantly, pressing the next button in the correct timing. You can change your combos by adding different moves with different effects. This is another aspect that got criticized for being shallow, because the only effects that matter are the ones that are mandatory to beat specific enemies, but the basic ones are still pretty important, especially if you're playing this in the harder difficulty. There is a subtle need to use the red blows to break through defenses, then use the yellow moves to regain some health, because it's easy to get hit in this game. So yeah, I found it enjoyable. Again, not stellar, not the best combat ever, but definitely fun. There is a little bit of exploration to find hidden collectibles, which is fine, and a whole lot of climbing. This I don't like. It's the almost zero real gameplay kind of climbing, and there is a lot of it, but it didn't offend me or anything. And the boss fights I really enjoyed as well. I like Remember Me, man. Most who played it do too, and remember it to this day. This is not a forgettable game at all, despite what critics may have convinced you of 11 years ago. This next one is pretty unique and very cool, and this is coming from someone who doesn't usually gravitate to this kind of game. We're talking about DarkStar 1, The Broken Alliance. This game is impressive, at least considering its generation. DarkStar 1 is a space-themed adventure with a lot of freedom and choices to make. You are the pilot of the titular DarkStar 1, a very special spaceship that is capable of upgrading itself, given you find the right parts. This is much more fun than it sounds, because it can really upgrade the ship in many ways, making everything better. The combat in this game is actually great. Space combat can be incredibly complex and obtuse, but they did some magic here. I love how you can easily pick up speed and especially slow down drastically, which enables you to regain the sights on your enemy very quickly and in an organic and believable way too. This is further enhanced by a clever targeting system that compensates for the enemy's movement, showing you where to shoot. This sounds like it would remove the challenge and consequently the fun, but it really doesn't, much on the contrary. As you evolve your spaceship, several new weapons become available, including turrets that shoot automatically, and this is required because this game gets really hard in the combat side. Then when you're not shooting, you're doing all kinds of missions, and many of it is optional. You can even choose to fit a merchant role with a pretty deep trading system, for instance. So yeah, DarkStar 1 is pretty cool, definitely on the underrated side, at least a little bit, and worth the not expensive digital price considering the production value in it. It also counts with a physical. Moving on to a pretty different kind of game, Choplifter HD. This is odd but kinda cool. It's a side-scroller where you ride a chopper and your main objective is not to shoot the enemies but rescue war victims, including citizens, news channels, crews, and injured soldiers. Not too many games with the rescue gameplay focus, so this is a nice change of pace for sure. You have to be extra careful about landing, hitting constructions, and being shot while carrying rescuees because they may die really quickly with any of that. You can turn the helicopter facing the camera in order to shoot down enemies positioned in that direction, which is an interesting addition to the gameplay. You also need to keep fuel in mind. There will be a couple of spots where you can refill, and a bunch more surprises await, like stages with zombies and many more. Cool game for sure, and this was delisted from Steam, so right now only the 7th generation of consoles offers this one. Next is The Legend of Spyro Dawn of the Dragon. This is a solid Spyro game. You get what you expect, a big adventure with a lot of platforming, collectibles, elemental powers to upgrade, not a very tight combat system, they always felt kinda wonky for my taste. Not bad though, some light puzzle solving here and there, and pretty huge and beautiful areas to fly around in. This whole game can be played in co-op multiplayer, which is pretty neat, as Spyro and Cinder are bound by a magical chain. In single player you can switch between them, and each one has a different set of abilities and levels up differently too. There are also elite enemies you can optionally try to defeat. They will require you to attack them with a specific element, and they all pack a punch, very difficult to take them down. So yeah, I like this game. Not the best Spyro, but perfectly enjoyable for fans of the series or action adventures in general. And it's stuck in the 6th and 7th generation, nowhere else. It's PlayStation 2, Wii, PlayStation 3 or 360 for this, that's it. Next on the list is a game that to me has only one problem, the price. This is History Legends of War Patton. This is 100% a turn-based strategy game, but with military units and vehicles, which is pretty cool. The combat mechanisms are absolutely solid and rather intuitive too, which could have been a easy pitfall for the developers. I like how instead of having a dice roll or whatever to determine if an attack will hit the enemy, you can shoot from as far as you can spot them, and the shots will travel and the odds of succeeding get smaller the farther it goes, but this is many times worth trying and it feels really cool. I can't explain how, you gotta try it for yourself. After battle you can use points you earn to upgrade your units, turning marines into snipers for instance, which is another very satisfying aspect. Plus the realistic and historical aspects mix real well with this kind of gameplay. I really enjoyed it. Problem, like I said, is the price. $34.99 for this one is just too much. This is begging for a sale, let's hope for that. Moving on to the unstoppable Viking Battle for Asgard. You know what I like about this game? Its simplicity. Most other action adventures will be quite demanding, full of side quests, deep complex mechanisms, loads of cutscenes, and while there is nothing wrong with all that, I can also appreciate when a game goes for the straightforward route. And that's very much the case of Viking. It is so straightforward you can't seem to find a good time to take a break. It's just constant moving. Anything you need to learn in this game, like using the simple elemental imbuing mechanism or using the only 3 items the game has, you can do so in less than 3 seconds. No time or need for any planning or contemplation. Just keep going. Find other Viking dudes to set free and join your cause, slash some demon fiends, find an enemy stronghold of some kind, spend those 3 seconds to look at the map and devise a invasion plan, invade, kill more demon guys, find some loot, then when you do that for 3 or 4 times in a row, you free a whole bunch of Viking dudes and now you have yourself an army. So you can spend those 3 seconds more to go to the map and order them to storm the big demon headquarters. And now it's an all-out war, dude. I really like this dynamic. I know it sounds like it would get repetitive quickly, but they made a great job with the level design here. Locations are wildly varied. You go from a vast plain to a steep mountain climb, then to a pretty deep system of caves, then a rudimentary mine, a bridge crossing, a castle, a monastery, ruins, a whole bunch of places that compose a pretty complete and enjoyable environment. And it all goes rather well with the unapologetically blunt but powerful gameplay. Viking is a solid game if you like what you see. It also has a physical version which I believe is still cheap. Next is a fantastic adrenaline shot to the vein, Gun. Okay, this is more well known I think, because the game is awesome. If you like an action-packed third-person shooting adventure, this is perfect. You've got your slow down time shooting, horse riding shooting, saloon shooting, wagon shooting, boat shooting, minecart shooting with TNT launchers. I mean, the works. So what else do you need? I could go on, but honestly, that's all you need to know. So if you like a western themed third-person shooting action, this is one of the best games out there. Gun is in a bunch of other older systems, PlayStation 2, original Xbox, GameCube, and even a PSP version with new missions if you want, but the 360 versions has the best textures among all versions, including PCs. So this is the one to get in my opinion, and note that the PlayStation 3 never got a part of this game. Next are two very underrated games that people have grown more and more fond of as time goes on, thank God. This is 99 Nights 1 and 2. Check Famitsu. I always say this, if it's a Japan-made game with the slightest chance of not being understood and appreciated by Western critics, at least consider checking out the Famitsu scores. The original 99 Nights got a whopping 37 out of 40, and the sequel a still excellent 34. There you go, how discrepant from the 4s to 6s these games got in the West. How come though, right? Well, these games are not for everyone, that's for sure, but reviewers out there ignore that there are different tastes for different people. There is no escaping the fact that these are Musou crowd combat types of games, which come with a lot of aspects that easily alienate people. These are totally unrealistic. Your characters are about 2,000 times more powerful than a regular enemy who is mostly just standing there waiting to be killed. But there is fun to be had here for sure. There are plenty of more challenging boss fights that will require a lot more attention, and the small chip damage you receive during the more mindless portions of the game will make a big difference then. When facing a powerful enemy, you will be required to use items and be careful with your positioning and all that, but the games are far from entirely mindless. Plus, the production value is really high with some awesome CG cutscenes, characters' designs are pretty cool, each having a small campaign to go through where you keep unlocking new characters. I enjoyed these. If you also like Musou games, these are most likely not gonna disappoint. The original has already been delisted, however, while the sequel remains available digitally as well as physically. This next one is awesome. IL-2 Sturmovik Birds of Prey. What a rather impressive aerial combat game that manages to be simple to learn and at the same time deep in many ways. It also looks beautiful. The mission structure is pleasant with many different locations and loads of enemies at once. There is also an option to play this in simulator mode where you get the realistic perspective from inside the cockpit, which is much harder but will be appreciated by some, and the game is full of that kind of detail, from the plane models to the explosions and crashes. Great game and a must if you're into dogfight shooters. Okay, seriously, this next one was very unjustly berated by critics. Very underrated game here. It is jank though, in many ways, which may spook a whole lot of people, but it's awesome in so many others. This is Venetica. This was made by a small developer team, so given that this is a open world-ish action RPG and a rather ambitious one of those two, it is no wonder that the game lacks in many aspects, but mainly in the presentation. Character models and animations are not easy on the eyes. Some things like lightning effects many times feel off, leading to some places being unnaturally dark or bright, but beneath the unappealing surface there is a pretty solid and enjoyable adventure. You control Scarlet, a regular girl tasked with defeating a powerful evil, and to do so she is imbued with the power to travel to the netherworld, where she can battle netherworld creatures and talk to the dead. The main criticism I disagree with is related to the gameplay. This is definitely a decent gameplay. Scarlet has a number of weapons she can use, with the main one being the Moonblade, unlocked in the beginning. Combat seems like, but ends up not being hack and slashy. You can hack and slash, but it will only work on the easy difficulty setting, which weirdly is set by default. So I highly advise changing the difficulty to medium or hard to get a proper challenge if that's what you want. Then the game becomes enjoyable to any action RPG fan, with the necessity to time your blows, dodge away from enemy attacks, and use magical and physical skills you unlock in two different skill trees. I also really like the sense of adventure here. The game progresses very nicely. Different NPCs will grant you different abilities, there's always a reward for exploration, the locations are beautiful, so the game is not all bad in terms of visuals. I mean, yeah, Venetica Venetica is nice, man. I enjoyed it. I'm not saying this is a 9, not even an 8, but I'd give it a solid 7.5. So I really disagree to the scores that the reviewers gave this game, especially the ones that went down to the 4 range. And I believe gamers by and large agree. You can see the Steam scores of currently 7.8 that tell me exactly that. By the way, Steam has a gold version of this game, but in my research, as far as I could tell, what's gold about it is that it adds a bunch of digital stuff like the soundtrack and art book for you to download. That's it. Another thing to mention is that the Steam version used to run better than on consoles, but it's the opposite now because current PCs don't run it as well. This has also gotten more expensive physically, so the digital may feel like a better option. Next one is totally a guilty pleasure game. The it's so bad it's great kind. Bullet Witch. This is a train wreck, alright? In many ways, the witch with the gun theme is goofy to begin with, but then the enemies are just so ugly I can't even explain. Graphics are overall really bad, and the shooting action is bland, not terrible, just uninspired. The spells compensate for it though. You can create walls for cover and cause some pretty incredible destruction with tornadoes and meteors. Some moments in the latter part of the game become pretty awesome, but the beginning is the weakest part for sure, so this leaves a very bad first impression. Bullet Witch is for someone who can appreciate the good parts and laugh at the bad ones, while having a good time killing the stupid AI with big guns and awesome spells. This has become more and more a cult classic of sorts. The physical is getting expensive actually, so it's definitely worth a mention. Next we have Voodoo Dice. This is nothing flashy, nothing glamorous, just a perfectly decent puzzle game where you control a dice and will have to move in such ways to make the number on the top side match numbers of blocks impeding her progress. Then there are these other blocks you can match to get them to stick to you, so now you're rolling as 2 blocks and that way you can surpass gaps, but then you can't pass through narrow spaces, so you need to figure a way to get rid of them, and there's a lot more like that. It's super cool. If you're into puzzle games, you can do a lot worse than Voodoo Dice. Next we have the bonus section. Few games that are for some reason or another more niche. The first 2 are the exit games. These are great puzzle platformers. The actual puzzles are ingenious and a joy to figure out, but these 2 games count with some really slow gameplay. I mean, the animations for each thing you do, although detailed, are much slower than what most gamers are accustomed to. That's the only reason I put these here, because gameplay, level design and graphics are all great. Your guy has to escape and more importantly guide other people to escape buildings. To do that, you'll need to do a lot of environmental analysis and figuring out what the game allows you to do, like how high you can climb, what each of the many items you can carry do. For instance, there are young adults who cannot push heavy objects while big adults can. Young children can't do much of anything but can crawl through vents. You can directly direct the NPCs to perform the actions, which is cool, but all this is performed in a rather slow manner. So I can see a lot of people not having the patience to endure it. If you're not among them, both exit games are great. Next is Puzzle Bobble Live. This is a solid puzzle bobble game, also known as Bust a Move Live. It counts with a lot of stages, you can choose many different routes, so there's a good amount of replayability here, and Puzzle Bobble is definitely an enjoyable type of gameplay, but I think these are more niche, at least when it comes to home consoles. This is 100% exclusive to the 360, as it was only otherwise available on the long defunct WiiWare under the name Puzzle Bobble Plus. This next one was pretty well received, but it's more fun in multiplayer. Rocket Riot. Gameplay is cool, but the single player to me left something to be desired. You'll fly around and shoot rockets at opponents, while the entire scenario can be destroyed, which goes really well with the tiny voxels they chose for the graphics. I found it a bit repetitive though, with only a few missions having objectives different from blasting everyone else, but I'm pretty sure others will enjoy this better than me, and it is fun in short bursts for sure, and if you can play this in multiplayer locally, it gets a whole lot better. Then we have Anna Extended Edition. This is a horror puzzle game in first person. It counts with some great ambience work inside the house that actually succeeds in creating a scary atmosphere. The narrative starts off very unassuming, but picks up a whole lot, and it even counts with a total of 8 endings for it. The drawbacks are minor. The point and click controls don't migrate well to the Xbox 360 controller, and the item using system is not the best, but none of this is anything close to game breaking, and a few puzzle logics here and there are questionable, leading to just trying whatever until it works, but those are not very often. So yeah, there is definitely a worthwhile game here if you're into horror and puzzles, but I feel like this is a bit more niche because most of the puzzles are very focused on using and combining items, which I feel like is a gameplay style that most people have left behind. I hear there are major issues on the Steam version of this game, including a launcher that you cannot skip and forces you to watch advertisements apparently. So if you're interested, you may want to consider grabbing it on the 360 before you can't anymore. And that's it for now, people. Don't forget to subscribe and do all the engagement stuff like liking and sharing and all that, not just to help me out, but to get these games known by more people before they are removed from the store forever. Also, don't forget that in June 18th, more games will be added to the discount sale according to Microsoft, and I will be all over that, so expect a video from me very soon afterwards. I also want to thank my wonderful patrons who keep this channel alive, and I invite you to become one of them as well. Anything helps. $1 makes a huge difference actually, so come on over. And that's it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.